remember years ago a little fellow who was only around 7 years of age, and his mum had brought him to see me because he was finding it difficult to keep up with his teammates at school because he was getting sore legs. And his heels were particularly sore. Anyway, the sports teacher had told him he wasn't allowed to play soccer anymore. And all his other teammates and his buddies were all in the team, all playing, going off on Saturdays, enjoying their sport. And he was sitting on the sidelines until he withdrew completely. He became depressed. His mother was really, really concerned about him. And he was in a really dark place. And at the age of 7, that's really a terrible scenario to have. So somebody had said to her, well, have you taken him to a podiatrist? And she sort of said, no. And so he presented with his mum, and he was very forlorn, but it was obvious, you know, as soon as you looked at him, you knew that just by giving him some exercises to do, to change his foot position, to get him functioning differently, that within a few weeks he would be able to get on and play, which he did. And I reviewed him 6 weeks after we treated him with his orthotics. He was back on the team, a big smile over his face. To me, that's what it's all about, you know, the joys of this profession. It also has its sadnesses. A couple of years after that, a mum and dad bought a little boy who was only 9, who was complaining of leg pain. And they felt that you know, there was nothing really wrong with his foot. They hadn't noticed anything particularly wrong with his foot. But every night this leg would ache and he would complain, and they were fed up. And again, somebody had suggested, have you taken him to see a podiatrist? And I said, podiatrist, you know, why? So after getting that history and looking at his foot, it didn't appear to me that there was anything particularly functionally wrong with the way that he walked, except for this slight little limp that he had because his leg was sore. So he had his leg x-rayed, and he had bone cancer in his leg. So that was terrible, and he ended up having to have his leg amputated. And so, you know, along with the things that you can do, there are things that are also not pleasant but have to be done. And that in your role as a practitioner, there are lots of responsibilities that come about that sometimes appear not to be absolutely related to the work that you do.
Can you just go through what sort of responsibilities you mean with that?
Well, for instance, with the little fellow that I'm just talking about, it could have been easily dismissed. There's nothing wrong with his foot. But one of the things that cause alarm bells to go off in your head is night pain. And so the responsibility is to follow that up and to make sure that the GP is informed, get an x-ray done. You know, and in this case, within a week, unfortunately, that little boy lost his leg. But it could have been, and you could say, well, you know, he could have had his leg for another 6 months, but the cancer could have spread, he may have lost his life. You don't know. And so I think that to ignore things that may be a little vague, and this doesn't apply just to podiatry, it applies to any responsibility that anybody has, particularly when you're looking after somebody else's welfare, that you go whatever extra yard you need to go to ensure that you have looked at everything that you should look at to make sure that your patient is well looked after.
universe.